with everything going on in the world and in this country particularly. And preparing for today's sermon, I was like, how can I make them think a little more today? You said it. So, you notice the title of the sermon is The Empire We Serve and the Empire We Resist. Empires want grief to be grief and quiet. Mourning disrupts the story that everything is working as it should. When communities grieve, lives lost to violence, when official statements do not match evidence or lived experience, mourning becomes an act of resistance. It says, this life mattered. This truth matters. Jesus blesses that refusal to forget. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Meekness is not weakness. It is strength that refuses to become cruel. The empire believes fear keeps order. Jesus says the future belongs to those who can hold power without abusing it. Luke Skywalker does not defeat the dark side by becoming violent, more violent than his enemy. He defeats it by refusing to surrender his soul. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. The empire depends on reputation. Say something often enough and people stop questioning it. Jesus blesses those who cannot accept injustice, those who ache for accountability, transparency, and truth. Righteousness here is not private virtue. It is public justice. To hunger for righteousness is to refuse lies dressed up as order. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Empire survives on punishment and retaliation. Mercy threatens it. Mercy does not excuse harm. It insists that justice must remain human. In Star Wars, the moment that breaks the empire is not a battle. It is mercy offered where none is expected. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Purity of the heart is clarity, the ability to see through propaganda, fear, and distortion. Empire clouds vision so people stop trusting their own eyes. Jesus blesses those who keep seeing clearly, even when truth is inconvenient or dangerous. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Empire enforces peace through intimidation. Jesus calls peacemakers those who will actively pursue justice, repair, and reconciliation. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Jesus ends by telling the truth. Resisting empire comes at a cost. Truth tellers are discredited. Justice seekers are threatened. Communities that refuse the lie are labeled dangerous. Jesus says, you are blessed. You stand in the long line of prophets and rebels who refuse to confuse power with God. See, everything Jesus did is about social justice. It's about equality and equity. When do we hear of Jesus saying, let's arm ourselves? When did he say, let us gather as a mob and attack the people? When did he take a collection so that he could get a private jet? Or in his case, maybe a luxurious chariot? He did it. How many quote-unquote pastors don't we have in this country alone who do such things. There's a particular evangelical, can't say the name right now, evangelical pastor who's on TV a lot, whose parsonage, and most of you have seen our parsonage, is in the shape of a cross, but it's a mansion. Probably 10 times the size of what I have. So you aren't painting me enough. See, that's materialistic. That's what Jesus came and preached against. I think that it goes without saying that most of us, if not all of us, are tired of everything that's been happening in this country. Day in and day out. Some of you sitting here may be struggling now to find adequate health care access because of the changes that have been made, or lack of. Food is becoming more expensive. Remember the days where you would spend $100 at the grocery store and you had at least 10 bags of groceries? And now you get what, 3, 4 maybe? This is something that affects everybody, not just one person. So, when we think of, well, why can't they just do this or that? The answer is because we all have to fight. I'll remind you, about a century ago, those who stayed on the sidelines, who were complicit, what happened? How many countless lives were lost? And that continues today. See, I'll remind you again what I said last week, is that where is the rage for all the people of color who have been killed by our government? But we had 2 white folks killed this year by our government, and everybody's outraged. But what about the little Latino 5-year-old that's going out with his family by himself in a detention center? Or a 7-year-old, or a 2-year-old, or a 12-year-old. See, Texas has a particular detention center in Dilley, Texas, which is a small town. If you blink, you'll miss it when you're driving on the expressway. I used to drive by it often when we were going out of town from my hometown. It was usually pit stop, or I'm really hungry, and there was a convenience store that had really good burritos. But now it has that detention center that has thrown the spotlight for that town. There was one man who was chased away from the parking lot because he was recording a certain area where you could hear the kids screaming that they'd be free, that they wanted their parents, mainly in Spanish. And I understand most of you don't know Spanish, but you can hear the desperation, the hurt in a child's voice, no matter what language you speak. See, the empire is doing that to us now. This is not about political parties. This is not about this or that. It is about valuing each human life equally as God sees it. Yet most of us are failing to do so. Thanks to our new admin assistant, we've got a little bit more spotlight on social media, particularly on YouTube. And a couple of weeks ago, among other comments that they left for us, which if you're interested, you can go read them, because we don't censor unless it's really offensive or death-threatening, then we'll remove and block the person. But one of them was that I was a Marxist, and that our church spoke about Jesus but didn't know Jesus. What do you all think? Do we know Jesus in this congregation? Yes or no? Let me hear loud.
Yes.
You live it. This congregation, since I've started, you demonstrate the best you can what Jesus demonstrated for us. We welcome the stranger. If someone is hungry, we give food. If we have lots of food, like some Sundays that we do, because some of you go a little overboard with fellowship, I'm sure most of you don't care, but when we have lots of leftovers, we give it to whoever wants them. We don't question, well, do you really need it? No. See, we're going to do communion today, and as a former Catholic and rising up along the border and Mexican and what have you, to me, once you consecrated communion, the wafers have to go into the tabernacle because they've been consecrated. You can't just do whatever the heck you want with them. And it was very difficult for me in seminary where we broke real bread like I do sometimes, and then just give it to whoever wanted to eat it. And I'm like, I just don't understand that. Why doesn't it go in a tabernacle? Now, granted, bread would get moldy. And I had one colleague saying, well, what did you get? I said, I just don't get it. It should be in a tabernacle. That's how I was raised. Said, now imagine you're no longer Catholic. You no longer have to give wafers. You give actual bread sometimes. If there is a person who's attending church that day, who's hungry, and you say, whoever wants the rest of the communion bread, come and grab it. And maybe that's all they're going to have to eat is that bread for the rest of the day or the week. Does that not make more sense than putting it away in a container? See, there's sometimes practices that we don't question because that's just what it is. And we try to see it a different way. See, every time I come up here and preach, it's not always for you. Sometimes it's for me. I need the reminder. But most of the time, no matter who I'm preaching at or for, the goal is for us to think for a moment outside of what we traditionally think of. I know Kyle likes when I talk about movies. I know some of you prefer the old school, traditional, keep it just from the Bible and relevant story. I also know that our congregation is purple, not just because it's my favorite color, but theologically and politically, we are purple. And that's a beauty of this church. If you notice, I try to balance my preaching. Why? Because I recognize all of you where you potentially are. Now, you haven't seen some of my colleagues where they go really beyond where I go. If you ever want to see them, let me know and I'll send you a link. See, I want you to open your eyes if you have not. I want you to take your blinders off if you have not. We live in an age that if you believe whatever you're told without you doing your own research by trusted sources, You're ill-informed. See, these two white folks who have been killed by our government have been assassinated not once but twice. Once physically, second is their story, their character, to justify their unaliving. That's exactly what they did with Jesus. They found excuses to justify his crucifixion. And I'm sure you've been in a situation where you were put down and it's justified. Now, I'm not saying pick up a poster and go hit the streets, because I'm not one to do it. I'll support whoever wants to do it. Go for it. But you need to stand your ground. If you're being fed misinformation, stand your ground and say, no, that's not so. Because the moment that you value a white life over others and you ignore that, you are feeding into the same empire that we are supposed to be fighting against. And some of you have either relatives or close friends who are people of color. And you can't say you care and love them if you are not doing your part to protect them. I can easily participate with my colleagues when they go and protest and do this and do that. But I'll remind you, because of what I look like, even though some of you say, well, I don't see you as a Latino. While you think that that's a compliment, it's not. Then you're not seeing me for who I am. And that's why I don't go and participate with some of these things, because I am more likely to be picked up than my white colleagues are. I am more likely to be roughed up than my colleagues are. And as I've discussed with a couple of the lay leaders, is they don't want me to place myself in that situation either. And because we are in a covenant together, I take that input. Aside from someone who gets along with a couple of the lay leaders and continues to push on. We'll mention one particular lay leader. But even if we say, well, physically I can't do this, or I have no platform, you do have your own personal platform. And you can push back. I want you to think of that. See, I want you to think of the little lives. Yes, my son is obviously white, but he thinks he's Mexican sometimes. Go figure, right? See, but if you recall, 5 years ago, he was still a little thing. And now he just doesn't be quiet. He gets mad because I tell him that I tell people he's a 35-year-old living in a, well, tomorrow, 7-year-old's body. But when I came here and you called me the first time, I asked if it would be a problem for me to preach with him on my arms. And that group said no. I said, okay. If it becomes a problem, then I'll need it in writing. And what happened? Did it become a problem? No. Instead, we welcome more kids to run around like Max. And now his sister. And I remember Jessica sitting back there with Rogan, and she got up real quickly and moved to the narthex, and I stopped. And I said, where are you going? It's because the baby's loud. I said, so? See, some of you might not remember that. I do. Partially because I felt bad, because I felt like I was calling her out in front of everybody, which was not the intention. It was just to allow everybody to think. If we don't hear those little voices, if we don't hear the noise that they're making or the wiggling that they're doing, then we're missing the future of the church. And the future of the church is happening out there right now. It is not just our kids. It is those folks who are out there, who are fighting. Keep that in mind, because you have power, the power that God gave you, the power that Jesus instilled in us. The empire does not belong to one leader. It does not belong to one administration. It does not belong to one ideology. It does not belong to one church or one denomination. Empire is a system, and systems survive only when people accept their stories as truth. Jesus proclaims another reality. The kingdom of God belongs to the people, to the grieving, to the truth tellers, to the peacemakers. We are not called to serve the empire. We are called to resist it with courage, mercy, clarity, and love. In the Spirit of God, the force of justice and compassion is still with us. Let us pray. God of truth and justice, you see what empires try to hide and hear what power tries to silence. Give us the courage to resist lies, the tenderness to mourn what is broken, and the strength to pursue justice without becoming what we oppose. Keep our hearts clear, our spirits grounded, and our love fierce enough to challenge injustice. May your kingdom come not through fear or domination, but through mercy, accountability, and peace. We offer ourselves to your work in this world.